become sane.
Sane in his old age.
You try to have some fun.
Yes, you got it. We old folks have to entertain ourselves. Don't we?
Well, that's a great way to do it.
This is my friend Myrna.
Hi, Myrna.
Myrna and Gary live
So the greeter, the threshold guardian is that character there. But I just want to say a couple things before we start, and that is, this is meant to be an installation work. So, and to me, what an installation work is, it's a way to create a kind of space. So it's not so much about the individual pieces. It's about the kind of space that's created with the pieces.
Yeah.
Wander through and talk about some of the things that was going through my mind while I was doing these. And I should say that most of the stuff here is found off the beach. So the centerpiece is there's a big cedar tree. Actually, that cedar tree was right at the end of the point. It was a huge tree. The sword piece down at the end there was the very tip of it, and there were two very handsome cedar logs that came out of that, which were taken away by a beachcomber. So I felt good about that. Anyway, this piece was hauled around. I actually had a rowboat pulled it around around the point, and my son, who is a big fellow, and his other strong friends helped me get it off the beach. And this is actually a made thing, and it was part of an installation I did in 1990 when Annette ran the Western Front Gallery. And it was an installation work called Under Saturn. And it was mostly around reflecting the work of a guy called an 18th century German sculptor whose name was F.X. Messerschmitt. F.X. Messerschmitt was a famous portrait artist, but his own personal work were these grimacing self-portraits. They were never actually shown. You can see them in the Lower Belvedere in Vienna, a few of them. They're amazing things. But I have been studying schizophrenic art, outsider art, for a number of years, and he is one of the major figures in that school. He was quite crazy, but I should tell you the story about why he made these faces. He felt that he was visited by the demon of proportion. Right, son? The demon of proportion, right? And the demon of proportion would pinch him severely and cause him extreme pain. So his way of magically thwarting and getting rid of this pain was to look in the mirror and pinch his face in the places where the demon pinched him to actually get back at the demon. So he would distort his face and pinch himself there and make these portraits. And he magically exorcised this demon. I thought that was a great thing to do, right? So it's what's called, you might call, if you like fancy words, an apotropaic image. It means evil. So threshold guardians, which are pretty well universal, especially in Asia. You know, the fierce images as you come in the gate. Work. But I thought of him, and in the 60s I was very involved with a lot of concrete poets in London, and I met a few of them. I met Dom Sylvester Houdard, who is an amazing monk, in Gloucestershire, who he was probably one of the major concrete poets of the time. And Ian Hamilton Finlay, I'd heard about this garden. I subsequently looked it up and gotten books on it in Scotland called Nunn Sparta. But the idea of a space with words in it and objects, and I don't do much planting here. But so that's one of the things behind. So there's a word here. This is also a found word, which was to be a part of a painting that I had started about 20 years ago, and I didn't finish it, and I put it away somewhere, and I found it, and I thought, oh, that will go opposite to that word. They both have similar but opposite meanings. This one sort of means word, one of the meanings. That one means image, one of the meanings. But they both mean God in a certain way. So any kind of, for me, what I'm developing here is a kind of, I would call it ironical druidism. Like, you know, it's like, I'm not really a religious person, but somehow or another, I found myself doing these kind of quasi-sacred images in finding these words. Like eidolon, for example, is the Greek word for the small image of the god in the temple. So if it's a temple for Diana, say, there would be a little chapel or niche, and with a small statue. That was called the eidolon. And eidos is the original kind of Greek word. The French word for sculpture is idole, so that's the same word. Reminded me of Saint Sebastian. He's having a tango. I also call it the marriage piece. And you know, as I say, you know, I spot a few real artists in this group, and I don't consider this to be sculpture because I have no background in sculpture. I was like Ad Reinhardt once said, a sculpture is what you bump into when you back up to look at a painting. Right. So I was kind of in that school for a while, but I just find these things and I maybe adapt them, put a little. The back part's not finished. A lot of this stuff is still being worked on, and so I feel that stuff like this, you can just project onto it anything you want to. What does it look like to you? Which nobody else gets unless I explain them. Right. So I don't know if anybody gets this joke. Panache.
Endless?
Endless panache.
And you ended the column.
That's right. But you know the last word in the movie of Cyrano de Bergerac with the guy with the big nose in it? I will never give up my panache. That was a good line. But his panache was his scarf or his sash that he wore that showed who he was because people didn't have uniforms. Well, originally the panache, which is the feather in the hat, in the helmet of the knight, identified the knight who he was. So in battle, a hero would be sought out by another hero to fight. So anyway, this is the panache. I always thought of that as a kind of animal image. But the joke for me is that, as somebody said, referring to Brancusi's endless column, is that in terms of panache also means style. Like, what style is that? Right? It's like, you could call it the dog's breakfast school of sculpture or something. To me, ersatz or fake is true, like today, right? So they make these kind of fake rocks and so on. It seems to me, well, also I'm too lazy to actually carve real materials, so carving styrofoam. And by the way, the styrofoam is found mostly on the beach too. I have a little electric chainsaw I can hold in one hand so I can carve this stuff really quickly. And it's coated with, sometimes with the cement, sometimes with Bondo. I call the front of this piece the Rosetta Stone. It's the Rosetta Stone, as you know, is the key piece of cuneiform writing that people were able to, figure out ancient writing. When I was building this piece, and so I hung it up and dried it out and pickled it in preservative, and I sealed it in here. So because the idea of the bird is sort of one of the themes in this place. The object up there, which I thought of as, I was actually reading from there now, so it's not only a fortress and a cloud and a bomb, but it's a birdhouse.
Well, what's it made of?
Beg pardon?
What's it made of?
Styrofoam. Because again, I wanted to give some kind of reference to clouds and lightning and so on. Although sometimes after I make some, you have to step a little closer for this one too. Sometimes when I put something together, I just improvise stuff. But somehow or another, well, I'd seen this exhibition in Paris of Caspar David Friedrich. I don't know if you know his work. He's kind of the high point of German Romanticism, 18th century. Wonderful painting. I love his paintings. Anyway, to me, this had the feeling of, so I have to put the name Friedrich down there, but it had the feeling of this kind of German, this kind of tortured, kind of romantic painting. Anyway, this is all kind of like found stuff. Again, there's a word that you have to read in order to, and this is a typical kind of Finlay trope, where you'll have a word and an object with different relationships. As it happened, when I was putting this together, I've been reading a text by Walter Benjamin with a long quote from Karl Marx. And I thought, God, Marx is really a great writer. And somehow or another, I thought, well, this column, which I think was from a fishing boat, it was probably this spindle for pulling in the net, because it has spikes on each end. And this object, which I found on the beach, which I think is, looks like it's probably from an old cream separator. What do you think? If you don't know about the green man is the Celtic vegetable or deity. But I discovered that the green man sort of image or idea is universal. Islam even has. And for me, the Jewish green man is the golem, right? So, and there's a native wild man of the woods and wild woman of the woods. So it's kind of anyway, that's built out of bits of Arbutus. So I call it the red green man, so it's Canadian green man. plan to have with this is a little plaque with the kind of text on it, which would say something like allegory on devolution, the origin of the species. And it's kind of like a joke about that would be a joke about one of the, like, for one thing, I'm a skeptic about all the evolutionary biology fashion that's going on now. Not that I'm religious or anything, but it just seems to be overdone. But also reference to Duchamp's bicycle wheel and, shall we say, devolution. Oh, here is, I call this one bracketed bird. It's like, and it's a joke that only somebody who reads a certain kind of philosophy would understand, because bracketing in the text means putting something in the text that could be taken out, and it can mean several things, and it can be removed without changing the text and so on. So this is kind of like a comment on kind of modernist sculpture, which is like, I saw a big Brancusi show in Paris. They're beautiful things. And this is very crude. And even making this crude thing is like really hard. Like, get, carve it out of styrofoam. And I put that between kind of pastiche of, say, Wyndham Lewis or some Borges sculpture. And this object, which is completely sort of made up, whimsical thing, and stuff on the beach and more styrofoam. Is that a sign that we're finished? But this shack here was the first studio of Jerry Pethick. When the Pethicks moved in, they lived in a cave over there. So this is a Pethick memorial. when this shack finally fell down, I took some of the shakes out of it. I mean, these shakes are like very old, but they're still really good. And I made this piece, and I tried to make it to reflect his favorite piece of sculpture, which is also mine, which is Boccioni's Walking Man. Mm-hmm. I tried to give it the same kind of rhythm as that.
That was really inspiring. I just
thank you.
So inspired.
Yeah, no, I was happy to be amongst friends.
Yeah, it was welcoming, and we were all sucking it up, and gratitude. Yeah, all that learning, all that traveling, all that distilling, because your pieces are like that. They're distilled. They're distilled layers of experience, right? And then you're reflecting that back, and we get to kind of absorb, and
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
It was really powerful. It was. Yeah. It was pretty neat. Pretty neat. I thought about what you said too about the physicality thing and the big thing, and then you're talking about being in the mind, and I felt like, and you were talking about making paintings using like almost like cake decorators, and, but then if you push that and push that and push that right down into that tiny point, right? Because that's kind of what you're doing. It's like the body then coming into the nervous system and then focusing right there on like the block.
That's a good way of putting it.
I felt that was really nice.
Yeah, it's more, that scales. More focus.
But it has such a historical. I mean, it's almost like we're hardwired for centuries of that experience.
Yeah, no, I believe that.
Yeah.
I think this is genetic. I'm not a skeptic.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
You're
Okay.
even skeptical of skepticism.
Right, that's right. Exactly right.
I gotta go.
Okay,
I pitched a ride, so they're
Thanks for
waving.
yours.
Okay,
Yeah,
bye.
Bye-bye.